What is up, Flick fans, and welcome back to my channel. And if you have not watched every single episode of Stranger Things Season 3, turn away now because this video is all about the spoilers. And not that there are major spoilers towards the beginning of the season, but once you get into the last few episodes, there are some deaths, there are some things that happen that if you have not watched this third season and you love this show, turn this video off, go check out my non-spoiler review, and then come back and we'll talk about spoilers. I also asked you guys to leave some questions in my last video and to put a few spaces if you guys were asking spoiler questions. Some people did that, some people didn't. I apologize for deleting some comments, but I don't want things to be spoiled for people who do not want them spoiled for them. But we are just going to go through some of those questions, answer them, and hopefully we can have a conversation in the comments down below because there's a lot to talk about with this season. And if you don't know, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I saw some comments where people maybe didn't love this season as much as I did, but that's okay, right? We can all be fans of this franchise and not love or hate the same things. But at the end of the day, we all come together and we can talk about it, hash out our thoughts, all of those things. So as of right now, I would rank the seasons, Season 1, Season 3, and then Season 2 slightly below that. I still thoroughly enjoyed Season 2. Now, there was one episode in there, episode 7, wasn't the biggest fan of. It is absolutely my least favorite episode of the series, but this season, man, every episode was strong for me, and it all comes down to the relationships, right? I saw an article on Twitter, and somebody literally tweeted out, Stranger Things Season 3 actually references the 80s. I'm like, who hired this guy? Well, what are you talking about? Of course it references the 80s. Now, some people are going to get annoyed with the fact that it does that so much in this season. I look at this show and think, if this show did not focus on the characters and give us interesting relationships, conversations, dialogue, then yes, I would be a bit annoyed at the fact that it's just playing on nostalgia, which it does. I love it. I'll admit that it does hold heavy on all of the nostalgic things that people know from the 80s. I wasn't born in the 80s, but I do love so many retro things, right? But then you look at the actual characters and what they have progressed from since Season 1 all the way until now, who they are in Season 3, which is a completely different set of characters, yet they are the same characters that we know and love. And what I love about this season is that these are still kids, but they're no longer the young and cute kids that we knew in Season 1 and even Season 2, right? It's been 2 years, and when you start maturing, when you hit puberty, it all happens so fast, and you can just tell that our main core of kids, they have grown up. They all have deeper voices now. And because it plays out that way in real life, kind of like Spider-Man Homecoming, Far From Home, they're growing up, they're getting older. They play it that way in the show. And the real focus, the meat of the season, are the relationships between the characters. And Mike and Levin, what we all wanted to see, where it starts at the beginning of the season. Now, I did notice a lack of fleshing out that relationship towards the middle of the season, but there are so many things you have to focus on to get us to that epic finale that we got. I understand why they did it that way, and you have Eleven who dumps Mike, right? Straight up like, I am dumping your ass. And that is exactly what she does. And she goes on her journey, her new adventure with Max, who I think is a great character. Now, she's not the biggest fan of Mike's, but she's just not the biggest fan of boys in general because of what's going on between her and Lucas. And in the midst of all of this back and forth between the relationships, I'm sure many of you have went through in real life, you have poor Will. The guy just wants to dress up like a wizard and play Dungeons and Dragons. Like, he would be me in that situation growing up. I'm like, guys, you got your girlfriends and your boyfriends. Can we just come home and play? And that's something that Will really has been missing out of because he was gone for so long. People thought he was dead in the first season, and then what he went through in the last season trying to fit back into society. He's the boy that comes back to life, right? And now you have a kid who didn't really get a chance to grow up normally, so he wants to have that, while all of these other kids, they've just moved on. They have their relationships now. Dustin, he's besties with Steve, and you have that relationship, which I thought was just like, that's my bread and butter. If you guys are asking, and I'm sure that's a question we'll get to, but who is my favorite character? I'm between Hopper and Steve. And it's crazy because you look at who Steve was in the first season, the guy was a bit of a douchebag, right? But just how they did in Game of Thrones, turning characters around, say Jaime, right? Jaime was a horrible person in the beginning, and without spoiling anything too heavily, he started to come around as a character, completely different situation, But Steve is a character that has really grown on me, and I just love, because you can care that he genuinely cares about these kids. He doesn't want anything to happen to them, and the guy just can't win a fight. Finally manages to win a fight. I love that fight against the Russian, and that was really their storyline, right? It's the Russians v. Dustin and Steve. Oh, and newcomers, Robin and Erica. Well, Erica's not a newcomer, but in terms of being a kind of, not a main character, but a co-lead character, yeah, she's a bit of a newcomer with this role, and she was really funny, really good. And then the character of Robin, who is Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman's daughter, so that's pretty cool. She's awesome. Everything she said, I was thinking. She said whatever's on her mind. I may be a bit biased because that's kind of how my wife is. She'll say anything that she feels the need to say, and that's exactly what this character was, who she was throughout the entire thing. And the storyline between her and Steve, I thought was wonderful. I thought they were going to end up together, honestly, and I was pushing for that. And then you get that turn to where she kind of comes out to Steve, and his heart was broken, my heart was broken. You have to accept that fact, because it's not like she can just come around in that sense, but you also buy it as a friendship, and the fact that he doesn't get mad, he doesn't blow up, he just accepts it, he moves on, and their relationship combined with Erica in this season and Dustin moving forward was great. Speaking of Dustin, his storyline with his made-up girlfriend was fantastic. I think we all expected her to come back at the end, right? But we didn't know how it was going to play in. But then you get the song. The song that could have came off so cheesy and ridiculous, could have ruined the entire story, but the way it was executed, and it all comes down to the characters' reactions to that song. It was great. You see her, you're like, okay, this girl is made for Dustin just because of the quirks and the antics that she has compared to what he is having. And then the fact that they just come together and sing that was great. And of course, they're giving him crap for that at the end. I think all of these storylines coming together is great. And we've not even really talked about Hopper. This is really Hopper's season. Hopper had a main storyline in the first season, and it comes back around to this season. And you have Joyce, who is dealing with the fallout of my boy Sean Astin. Last season, that was sad. But they have this romance sparking, and we've been seeing it. I've been wanting them to end up for a long time together, and then it starts to come to fruition here, right? They're like touching hands, and they're always fighting, they're always bickering and arguing. It's kind of like an old married couple, but in the best way possible. And I love their relationship. So you get into the actual end where some people start biting the dust, and let's talk about Billy for just a second, because of course Billy gets infested by the mind flare and he's turning into this evil creature, kind of what Will was in the last one, except but Billy is more mean-spirited, so I actually think he accepts it a bit more, even though there is that something inside of him. And I like how it wasn't just, oh, he's gonna be evil, we're gonna turn him bad, and then we're gonna kill him off. No, you get the relationship with Max, but you also get a bit of a backstory and why he is the way that he is. And that's one thing about a character like this that you can relate to real life. A lot of people that act out in this way, even without being completely possessed like a zombie, it's because of their upbringing and the parents and really all of those things coming together to create a bad environment. And we got to see that. We explored that. They utilized Eleven this season in the perfect way. One, her relationship with Mike is fantastic. And two, she wasn't overwhelmingly overbearing with her power. She used them when we needed them as an audience. And even though sometimes it was a bit expositional, I think it worked with what they were going for. I loved the writing in this season. I like how every time she got in a situation, sometimes it was a bit too convenient. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go here and follow Billy around. Oh no, Billy is the main villain. It's like every storyline, they just so happen to get caught up in the situation. But without those situations, we wouldn't have this season, right? Without Steve and them figuring out the Russians were infiltrating this mall and really the reason behind why it existed, we wouldn't have that storyline. Without Mike and Eleven and Lucas and Max doing what they did, we wouldn't have that exciting chase with the mind flare. And of course, Murray and Dr. Alexi, Joyce and Hopper, their situation, it's like all of these things happen and then they can come together to create that just incredibly epic ending. And I know I talked about the CGI in my non-spoiler review, but oh my god, the CGI was fantastic. Back to Billy. So Billy, he bites it, and I was okay with the fact that he bit the dust because he got a great storyline in this season. He was fleshed out so much more. He was really good at being menacing, and you came to not like respect him, but you're like, okay, the sacrificial thing at the end, as we all expected, and you can see that love there with Max. I really liked his character. A death that really impacted me, and I didn't think it would, was Dr. Alexei. I mean, the guy, you grow to love him throughout this thing. His relationship with Murray and just the way that they go about interacting was hilarious. And you see at the end when he's just popping the balloons, having the time of his life, he loves the situation that he's in, even though he may not want to admit that. And then that relationship gets torn to shreds when he gets shot by the big bad Russian guy. And that was honestly so sad. I hated seeing that for his character because he is confirmed dead at this point, and I really enjoyed what they did with his character, something I was not expecting at all. And then we get to the end, and let's just talk about that montage at the end when Will and his mother and now 11, they're leaving, right? And I got some questions in the comments, and we'll get to this in just a second and hit it really hard. But why were they leaving? Well, they've been through a lot. They just want out of this situation. I understand that. I don't blame them for not wanting to be there. Yes, you have friendships and relationships, but it's like, remove me from this situation, especially after what happened in Season 2 and how it scarred Joyce. And I love the fact that 11 went with them because it only makes sense. Those relationships have been built through all of these seasons. That was wonderful. And all of the tears on the kids' faces, you can see it, you can feel it, it's ripping you apart, and all of that on top of Hopper, his quote-unquote death in the show. It was just amazing. The way that they went about it, I mean, not showing the actual death was brilliant because it has some theories I'll hit on here in just a second, but the impact that it had on us at that moment, without all of the seeds planted, especially in the post-credit scene, at that moment, I thought it worked so well, and you can see that relationship with 11 just grow out of control at that moment when she reads that note and keeping the door 3 inches. Y'all just, come on. You did it. You paid off emotionally, and some may look at it as, oh, well, they're just going to reverse it in the next season, and it's just like Avengers Infinity War. You know they're not dead in the first place, but the impact that it had, that cannot be stripped away from me. I thought it was wonderful. Now, before I keep going, let's see if I haven't answered all of these questions already. I'm sure I have. I've been talking a long time. So the first question is, how does the Russians connect to the Mind Flayer? Well, I look at using the Russians as the villain. It's just like a nice throwback to the 80s, right? The Russians were always looked upon as the villains, and they're coming in, they're trying to reopen this gate that the Americans had open. I think the goal, the end goal, what they have in mind is to just kind of take over things and use what they have as a pet, as we see in that post-credits scene, to come back and accomplish their mission. We don't necessarily know what that mission is at this point, but that's clearly a storyline that they are not done with yet. So many questions unanswered, but I did like the incorporation of those characters. How did 11 lose her powers at the end? Well, for me, it is the gate closing. 11 loses her powers. Now, the gate did close the first time, so it could also be this emotional thing, right? She lost the most important person to her other than Mike, so the powers going away, it could be like another Tobey Maguire and Spider-Man 2 situation. They just have to come back, and I think they will come back eventually. It also could have to do with the gate. I'm not an expert on this stuff. Next question is, why couldn't Joyce have let Hopper in the room with her before she pushed the button? You know what? You have to do what is necessary. She had to do it as quick as possible. She knew her kids were in jeopardy, and just that little nod from Hopper told me that you have to do this right now or something really bad could happen to our kids. And he wasn't wrong because they were in a dire situation at that moment. Really good timing. Why does the group not help 11 or support her besides Mike? They're kids. They're petrified. 11 has superpowers. Mike doesn't have superpowers. Kudos to you, man. It took you a second to act, but you did it. And then, why is Will and 11 moving, and where are they moving to? Well, I don't think it really matters necessarily where they're moving to, but I've already explained kind of why they're moving, just to get away from this situation. Here's a question. Will is dead. No. Spoiler question. Next up, and I love how some people actually put a bunch of spaces. If you had spoiler questions, I appreciate that. Why do Elle and Will end up moving away from Hawkins? And where do they end up going? Another similar question. And how many more seasons will there be? I absolutely think there's going to be a season 4. No way. Now watch this happen. No way Netflix is dumb enough to cancel this show after the fan reception and this being their possibly their biggest show, their flagship show, right? And I already said that they're moving away just to get out of that situation because it's a horrible situation to be in. These other families and parents, they were not a part of this. Now, their kids were, yes, but they didn't see it. You see Nancy and Mike's mom, and she's just kind of oblivious to everything happening. By the way, her storyline with Billy, while I liked it at first, it didn't really go anywhere. It was one of those things that I didn't get paid off. It was one of the few storylines in the season that I didn't love just because they just cut it off and we didn't get anything from it. Maybe they'll continue it in the next season, but I just don't understand why it was necessary. All right, I'm looking for question marks, trying to find some questions. Ooh, and the biggest disappointment of this season is Steve did not get the girl. I understand that is a disappointment, but I did like the fact how he responded to that. He is a grown man now. He has matured, and you can see that in that situation. I thought that was great. Do you think Elle will get her powers back? Oh, yeah. She gonna get those powers back, baby. And it's gonna be this crazy scene in season 4. Everybody's gonna turn around, and it's gonna be her. The camera's gonna zoom in, as it has multiple times. You wait for that to happen. 954. Why were you zooming in on Steve when you said you had tears in your eyes? Tried to swerve you. Did it work? Do you think Hopper is the American in jail during the end credits? And how do you think the Soviets got the Demogorgon? Well, that second question is a hard one to explain, and you know it's going to lead somewhere in the next season. You know that storyline, like I said, with the Russians, it is not even beginning to be over. It might even carry on over into season 5 because I do think they're the next big human bads. But yeah, the American is in the cell at the end, and the only time I heard them say the American was when they were referring to Hopper earlier on in the show. So there you go, guys. I do honestly think Hopper is still alive. There are still so many things to be explored in relationships that he has within his relationships, whether it's Joyce or Eleven. And sometimes that is life, right? You get cut off. People die. It comes out of the blue. Those storylines, if you will, in real life, they don't get paid off. But that is one thing that I did want to talk about because I truly don't believe he is dead. I think Hopper has a huge chance to come back in the next season. The big question is, will it take away from the emotion that we got from those final few scenes? I can't answer that yet because I don't know how or when he comes back. I don't even know if that's confirmed yet. He may be dead for all I know. And if he is, what a way to go out. But if he's not, you have to execute this perfectly. This has to be something that cannot be spoiled. You cannot let behind the scenes pictures come out, because if he is going to be in the next season, he'll have an integral role or he'll come back at the main end. But I do believe that American in that cell is in fact Hopper. And so after looking through all of the other questions, they're all very similar to what I've answered so far. I don't want to keep saying the same thing, but I appreciate you guys asking questions. It's not like this is something that has the biggest spoilers of all time. There are only 2 or 3 massive things to talk about. I believe we've talked about it. If you guys have any more questions for me, I'm going to be monitoring the comments for the first few hours after uploading this review. I'll try my best to answer those. Do not worry about spoilers. This is a spoiler video. Thank you guys so much for watching this. This was a lot of fun. It's a nice little way to hash out my thoughts on this very entertaining season. Whether you loved it or you didn't like it, doesn't matter. We can all come together and celebrate this incredible show. I'll see you guys very soon.